They called them.
Go ahead. Go for it, right there.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, January 25th, 2022, meeting of the Bylaw Charter Review Committee is called to order. Any public comment? Anybody care to speak? Okay. Next is approval of our November 9th, 2021 minutes.
Agenda. Here.
Oh.
I have a motion, is there a second?
So moved.
That's a second, right?
Yes.
Okay. Moved and seconded to approve the minutes as written. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There's a vote. So our guest tonight is John Shorey, who's the Finance Committee Chairman. And we wanted to hear from you, John. Thank you for coming and welcome. We wanted to hear from you, John, specific concerns you might have about details in the charter. We had a little bit of a conversation, well, quite an excellent conversation, actually, with Joe Powers back in October, and one of the things he was pointing out is that some of the deadlines that you are working with are not working terribly well, so I thought you might want to maybe kick off with that.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Sandy and members. And, well, these masks are a pain in the neck, aren't they?
Mhm.
That's beside the point. I guess I really didn't quite know what to say or do tonight with you. I do have looked at the town charter. I do think there is some leeway. I mean, stuff in there for us to get the information we need. And maybe I should just share the frustration time on, like you say, on the deadlines, with the timeline, the budget timeline. We do produce one, or Joe produces one, and we don't seem to be meeting those deadlines. And maybe the selectmen can go in on that. One in particular is the capital budget one. It's long overdue now for us to approve and get it up. And,
When was that due, John?
I think like the second week of December, and we're supposed to hold a public hearing on it, and then once we hold a public hearing on it, we get it over to the selectmen, and then it starts going forward. So it's just tightening up the deadlines and getting them done, because town meeting comes up awful quickly. May 2nd may seem like a long time away, and I know Joe likes to say how many days are left to town meeting, but it's hard to dissect for me and from the committee the information to properly put recommendations together, I feel. One of the, and depending on the year, there are some meaty issues that draws public attention, and as we all know, it's not usually the multi-million-dollar ones. So sometimes they do, but sometimes it's the smaller ones that draw the public attention. We've got two this year that I haven't received any financial information on. One particular I have asked for some and have not received anything yet on it. I imagine it is forthcoming. Is that one being the cultural center coming up, of what to do with that building. That's something that we as a finance committee have been asking for a plan for a couple of years now. And in the town charter, it clearly states that the finance committee has the authority to talk to all department heads, the town committee, let me get it out of here, I can read it, and, which is good. I mean, that gives us, the finance committee, the authority to ask for this information. But when we ask for it, we'd like to get it. To assist in its preparation of recommendations, the committee may require the town administrator, the head of any division or department, or any town office, or member of any town agency to furnish it with appropriate data. I'd like to see that more enforced, and to get the information so we can weigh in on these. The other one is the school committee are voting to on their budget, but also the new funding formula that's going to be in that budget. And I don't want to get too much into details on that, but that's a huge number, as Mr. Howe knows. And I have hearing aids and it rings through my ears, but sometimes it rings on the phone, but it's a spam anyway. The school committee, the funding budget, which is a big thing. And I've been attending school committee meetings to learn more about it, which I feel very knowledgeable about that now. But that's a big one. That's $1 million swing either way on our budget for school committee. So I think initially the town charter gives us enough to do what we have to do. Town appointments to the committee by the moderator have been a little slow this year. Again, how does one, the rules are there, but where's the enforcement of the rules? And who's responsible for enforcing the rules?
We have no rules for enforcing the charter.
Okay.
A group of us did try about, 5 years ago, to have a charter, what we called a charter enforcement committee, which was modeled after Provincetown, practically word for word. The then chairman of the finance committee and the people who were on the board of selectmen hated it, wanted nothing to do with it, claimed it was going to cost the town all kinds of money if there was, some kind of reason to get lawyers involved. But the main idea of it was to have a place where people could go to, as you've just done, point out that the rules aren't being followed according to the charter.
Mhm.
Of course, we've had boards of selectmen in the past, not currently, that didn't really think the charter was anything more than a suggestion. So, I still would like at some point to have some kind of compliance board. But that's another discussion for another day. Done.
Yeah, if I could just weigh in on both these, because they're uniquely different circumstances. I know there are other things, and in fairness, you're supposed to get access. But as for the cultural center, when Carolyn quit her job and then the other person, Erica, quit, there's nobody there to put together this plan right now. I mean, we're in the midst of hiring somebody to assemble a plan. There's nobody actually operating it. We're borrowing assets. The school committee, I don't know what any of you guys want to do about that, but it presupposed a town school when the charter was passed. And this is an external entity. It submits a top-line budget. They are not subservient to the town in any way, shape, or form. I don't know exactly how you'd make them conform. That was one of the trades you give, is when you spin off something that's an asset and it becomes an external mechanism, they're no longer subject to what you're saying. I mean, I can tell you we're on their case about it. I am particularly. But I don't know where it goes because it's also subject to the Chatham Board of Selectmen, and they haven't actually asked the state for something fundamentally different, like a formula change. We're only talking about the ownership of the buildings. So for different reasons, I understand that, but I think that the deadlines, and that was something I was prepared to talk to you after, John, about, is that there are a number of things that are in the works that I was talked to Chairman McCaskill about before the meeting.
Well, Town Administrator Powers, that was one of the things that he was purportedly struggling with, was trying to meet deadlines because the ones in February are foreshortened simply because it's February and it's a short month. So I'm sure that affects you also.
Yeah, on the schools, what I've been doing is just going to their meetings, attending their meetings, so I'd have a good idea where their budgets are. I'm not too concerned there because I know where they're leaning to. It's the town stuff and it comes back to this compliance committee or enforcement committee. If I have an issue, or any person that's spelled out in the charter has an issue, who do I go to say, this person has not done this, I need it to do my thing. And, and that's, I don't know if that's in there or what we could do there. It's not a tremendous big deal. It just makes my job, and probably other towns, I know it makes other committee members that I've spoken to, their job much more difficult, waiting for the financial information. And the financial information I was referring to in the Cultural Center was from Carol Coppola. And she's given it to me in the past, and for this time, I can't get the information.
I can't understand that. She's a direct report. She's not,
Right. I mean,
she's
we'll
not,
talk later.
she's not under the town
I'll-
administrator.
I can show you something that'll make you grow hair probably, but,
Well, let's talk sooner then.
so that's,
He can hardly wait.
I mean, it runs pretty well, I think. It's my if you ask me what's my frustration level right now, it's the compliance of deadlines and enforcement of existing town charter.
So basically, you would like to see a body in place or a mechanism in place to take grievances.
Yes, yeah, to where I can go, and there could be valid reasons. I'm an understanding person, you know, there's reasons sometimes why things get delayed, and I can accept those. But some of my questions have gone unanswered for months on end. And I find that very frustrating, especially when there's viable solutions to those questions. I did read a couple weeks ago in the Chronicle, Finance Committee and the Finance Director in Orleans are via the town charter are at, you know, butting heads, for lack of better description. I don't think we need to go down that path of knowing every single financial detail of the town. That's not what I don't think we need. But we do need, when we're looking for information, we should get information in a timely manner. So,
Is there something that you think we could do to improve the charter to help that, separate and apart from maybe working on a compliance model too? I mean, is there a deadline that you could see maybe putting in the charter for responses to requests,
Well,
you know,
I think-
in-house, basically?
yeah, I think the budget timeline that the town administrator puts out is a good timeline,
Mhm.
but let's try sticking to the timeline. And
The
we're not.
deadlines are being missed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not sticking to the timeline right now.
Anybody questions, comments? Carol? You?
Well, I think we've talked about that before, you know, needing a common calendar that everyone is aware of and enforcing it.
Well, yeah, the calendar does no good if people aren't paying attention to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is the
Just going
calendar
back to
referenced in the
something we
town
talked
charter?
The town calendar is not referenced in the town charter, but during one of our early meetings, the need for a calendar each year with rather than being just tied to the third Thursday of the month, would be date specific every year, a new calendar, date specific. And Carol undertook to create that calendar. And we talked to Mr. Powers about it when he was here, and he loved it. He said he was going to
Yeah.
steal it
Said he-
and use it.
Mhm.
I don't know whether he has made any use of it or not at this point, but that's just, you know, that's one thing that has come out of our early meetings that everybody thought would be helpful, was to be able to look at it and say, okay, it's 2022, so that deadline is January 2nd, or whatever.
Mhm.
So Carol did that, town administrator has that, whether he has used it or done anything with it, I do not know.
'Cause it would help me in planning my meetings, you know. Right now, I really can't plan a meeting because there isn't one approved budget anywhere yet. And some of it is understandable why, but there's no capital outlay budget been approved, no operating budget.
When was
been-
the capital budget outlay was due to you in December?
You've got the calendar, I think it's
Yeah, it's supposed December 20th, according to the
Okay.
budget warrant timeline that I've got here.
And you've contacted capital outlay about this?
yes. And we are meeting next week again to, I think, probably vote on the town capital outlay budget at that point. We've only had 2 meetings so far, and I think the next one is next Wednesday, to, I think, approve the capital budget. And once we get that approved, then I can set a deadline or date for a public hearing on the capital budget.
Yeah,
And
that was
then,
supposed to be December 6th. Finance Committee publishes notice of hearing on capital outlay plan.
right. Yes, so that you can see the frustration level there.
So
Yeah.
best case, you're at least gonna be 2 months out of where you should have been.
So, there's no operating budget, capital budget, water department budget, school, Monomoy or tech school, no approved warrant articles yet from CPC. So there's nothing approved for the finance committee to look at. I mean, we can look at preliminary stuff, but that doesn't really do us any good. I mean, it gives you a starting point, of course, but I'd like to meet and, with an approved budget, and then we develop a course of action within our committee. But adherence to the timeline would be a good start. And then if timelines aren't met, then you go to this compliance committee and say, this is what the story is. We look into it, and there could be extenuating circumstances, which is I'm fine, especially now with COVID and everything else. And getting members hard for a quorum. I see the planning board meeting's been canceled for tonight. So it's a tough environment where everybody's in. We're all existing in this world of COVID now, and I understand that. But some of it, I think, can be alleviated with proper planning.
Yep.
I think the question is, should John go after these people, these committees? Or should there be a centralized body that would, go after? Or, remind them that.
I've always
you know,
thought so. It's not
Yeah.
something we contemplated originally, but then we never contemplated that people wouldn't follow along. And I
That-
think
that-
they
that
did to a
happens.
greater extent for
Right.
many, many years. I think this is more of a recent phenomenon in the last, 10 years, that this seems to have been an issue. So why now?
There's a lot in what he's saying. You want me to make a couple
Go
of
for
comments
it.
here?
Mhm.
First of all, my observation, and it's only mine because the selectmen have no position on it, is the dates actually had a reason behind them about why you needed to have certain things, the publication of the actual warrant, and when you back that up, what's reasonable in terms of telling you have to hold a hearing. And so it really is based on milestones that are important more than it is just an assemblage of dates. I don't even know why, and I've been complaining about this now for 4 years. The meeting with FinCom, and you both were involved in this, the meeting with FinCom on a Saturday to go through all the department budgets. What's the point if you already got to March and the department heads have already been told that's your budget and nothing else is going to change? That was supposed to be a point where somebody could make an advocacy position that if I got this, then it would allow us to do that. We can't have that discussion in any meaningful way now because it's not going to happen until well beyond when we can actually change anything.
Yeah, well, back in the day, I mean, the finance committee met with each department head,
Uh-huh.
each department separately. Selectmen did the same thing. And then we came together on a Saturday and hammered out the differences.
But that's not what's going on.
That is- that-
It's merely a date now that everybody gets to sit in the
Nobody,
same room.
yeah.
That was not even actually the original intent, and that wasn't the way it did work quite for a number of years. The whole point of having the joint meeting with the various department heads is because up to that point, what you would commonly run into is a department head telling the Board of Selectmen one thing,
Uh-huh,
telling the Finance Committee another thing.
exactly.
Two boards in different universes making decisions based on two separate sets of information. So the idea to solve and cure that problem
Mhm.
was to, instead of having department heads go to two separate sets of meetings every season, is that there would be one joint meeting, or two over time, over 2 Saturdays or whatever, where you'd have the department heads in front of everybody at the same time, so everybody got exactly the same information at the same time. And I think that's really been lost, but that was the original intent of doing that.
Totally lost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we met anyway.
it's unwieldy. I mean, especially if you've got night meetings and what have you, to expect the department heads to go to two different sets of meetings and then maybe be called back for whatever, because somehow there's been a communication between the two boards that says, well, that's not what we heard. We need to meet again just so we can figure out what we heard. So consolidating the two sets of explorations with department heads and people presenting budgets was the way to, first of all, cut down on a lot of wasted time and to make sure that everybody was on the same page as their understanding of what was said.
Yeah.
Well, that's just the poster child that I just brought up, because there are other things that have changed that have statutory requirements on the state level that we can't affect. There was no tech school initially. There was no Monomoy Regional School. There was no enterprise fund that spun off the water department in a quasi-autonomous way. There really, to me, it's more than just an assemblage of dates. That's kind of why I brought it up. We're going to have to ponder, what are you trying to do in each of these circumstances? What's the game plan here? Why are we calling for this data or meeting in the first place? And when does it have to be in to be able to integrate with other things that we're doing? And I don't think that, I mean, I wanted to look at that, about 5-6 years ago. It's a mess because things have changed. I know Joe was looking at the state regulatory frameworks for when a regional school has to report to the individual towns, the constituent towns. Because we can't tell them that they have to respond to you.
Oh, yeah.
They're a different governmental entity. So something's got to give, because there's all these moving parts, and the dates don't all make sense. I have to admit that. And then we had selectmen in the past who decided to engage in pop analysis of the charter, saying, well, the whole warrant has to be done by mid-January. We've had that discussion that the selectmen sponsored articles aren't subject to that, but it's muddied the waters entirely. I mean, I think you probably would want to take a deeper run for this coming year,
Top to
figure out
bottom.
what it is you're trying to accomplish and what dates to accomplish it.
Yeah, I think the department head meeting is important, but that should be like maybe in December. You know, while the board budget is being formulated, I agree. Get the two finance selectmen together with the department heads before the budget is finalized. 'Cause now the budget is finalized, there isn't a lot of wiggle room after that point.
And I don't understand the capital outlay fascination. We all, to one degree or another in this room, had worked to get away from what was essentially, had become a capital budget, and it had no meaning as a capital plan. Really, all they're diddling with
It's
is
1
1
year.
year.
Right.
I mean, they shouldn't be looking at a myriad of 20,000 items and where they all fit in, because it's all about competition for where you're gonna be placed on year 5 or year 7, whatever that it wound up being. That was the idea. It was to get it back to some sense of normalcy, because the plan wasn't just a plan for the town, it was a plan for all you guys when you were getting your tax bills, to know what it was they could anticipate coming up in the next year and how it is that we were going to finance it. It wasn't supposed to be, let's open up everything again to start from the beginning. So it shouldn't be that dense to be able to go through. You're only talking 1 year. And in rare cases, can we jump the line with a 2/3 vote with something that's new, because it's so compelling that we got to do that? But that's unusual. I mean, that was the whole reason it was a mechanism, but it wasn't contemplated as being used all the time.
Sounds like it would be useful to get together with the Capital Outlay Committee and talk about this and try to understand what their issues are with meeting deadlines.
I would, because there's been a certain amount of resistance of getting away from the capital budget and getting back to a
Right.
capital outlay plan.
Right.
But one should flow from the other. The budget really is subordinate to what's your plan and where's the hierarchy. If number 1 is the library and number 2 is the community center this year, and somehow both of them didn't happen, you can't go back and have the whole conversation start all over again about where they should be in a new capital outlay plan. It's supposed to be an orderly system.
Has the
You wait your
capital
place
outlay
in
plan
line.
been presented to the selectmen yet for this year?
No, there's a process,
No?
there's a process that comes to
There's been
us
some
first.
preliminary stuff, but nothing substantial.
I mean, I think the steps are, it comes to us first, we have a hearing, and then we approve it, and then move it on to the selectmen at that point.
I think we all need to,
Yeah, like 2
the
months
outcome that I
behind.
see is that we all need to get together, and I did talk to Chairman McCaskill, and he said that, obviously, he apologized you didn't get on the agenda for this past Monday, but he suggests that if we want to have a joint meeting on the 21st of February or the 7th, because he personally won't be there the 14th, and he'd like to be.
February 7th or February 21st
What?
to meet with the board.
Yeah, and bring up some of the issues.
Oh, yeah, we haven't done
That's fine.
And by the way, I jawboned enough to get the select board. It's in KP law right now. They're actually doing the text because I pointed out to them that this was never anticipated as a homework assignment for you guys. You were gonna vet it after it was presented.
Like a chance to vet it after he gets through with it. Just saying.
I've had to rewrite a few things in the past.
Yeah.
I think a plan is important, though, a 5-year plan is very important.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it gives you a 5-year forecast on what the town is looking at. And presently, I think we're looking at $80 million for the
So-
next 5 years.
That's
A
the
big
other
chunk.
moving part, though, that's really daunting, is I myself don't know what proportion of that.
It's supposed to be in the hands of the town administrator, November 30th.
Yeah, but the plan and how each item is funded are two independent variables. They're not the same, because the plan becomes more.
The plan spins off the articles that fund the items that are in
Some
the
of which
current
may
year of
be
the plan.
debt exclusions, some of them may
Right.
be overrides, and some of them may be being paid for their capital out of free cash, like fire engine or something. So it's kind of important to know what it is you're buying, but it's also important for them to exclude from consideration those things that we're not gonna borrow, because the whole point of the plan is create some sort of level borrowing plan.
And the big number of that 80 million is the sewers. I don't want people to
Well,
misunderstand.
we're not actually, the purpose of our function is not to drill down on the numbers or worry about which capital plan is in place today or tomorrow. What we are trying to do is find out where we can make changes in the charter to be more specific, to going forward that would be helpful to your committee and others. If part of that might be working more on some kind of compliance
Mhm.
board, that's something we certainly can look at.
I would suggest that it might be a good idea to have them partake in the same meeting.
Come
So-
in when,
So if there's no way of slipping out away from the discussion that here's why we need this and here's what we're suggesting.
well, maybe what we should do is, instead of necessarily meeting jointly in the middle of a Board of Selectmen's meeting, maybe we need to hold a meeting that's more in the nature of a workshop about some of these things, with capital outlay, with FinCom, because these are really important functions.
Yes.
Would that work? That way we could get everybody in a room.
Yeah, whatever, it's the timelines get squished and squished.
Well,
and
we're
then
not-
all of a sudden, we're approving
Yeah,
multi-million-dollar budgets, and we haven't had a due diligence on that.
and we're not gonna solve that in time for this year, I don't think.
Yeah, I understand
I mean,
that,
it's
yeah.
already blown.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm intimately familiar with it being an 8-year problem, and I suggest it's probably longer than that. And we keep changing each year about how we're going to approach it, and it keeps being a problem. It's, those dates are not being met. Let's just be that blunt. They're not being met.
Okay. So with that in mind, we probably, we should think about a time, a date, a place for a workshop. That's gonna require a little bit of coordination.
Sure.
But we can do that, whether you wanna try to do it ahead of all of these other deadlines that aren't being met. Is a
We're
good
pretty far
question.
behind right now.
Yeah. What do you think, Don?
I think the workshop idea is great, but also it's not the kind of thing where you just come into the workshop and throw things against the wall and see
Right.
what sticks. So you may need to do some homework of your own. Why is it you need this on this date rather than that date is the fundamental question.
Mhm.
And then the chart, then the map gets put together about when everybody gets to do what and when they have to do it. And then the compliance becomes an issue if you don't do it. But that all flows from what is it we're trying to do here?
This feels like something that ought to be done maybe in the month of July or August,
Yeah,
before this thing gets underway, and that everyone knows that it's coming and it's gonna be enforced.
that's
I
why you
think-
probably want to talk about it now, though, because in order for
I
you
mean,
to
I
have
think-
that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the workshop itself needs to take place then, and then put these regulations or suggestions, whatever you wanna call them, in place, so that everyone's, ahead of the game.
For the short term, maybe though, we should consider inviting capital outlay to our next meeting, and there's nothing to stop you from attending
Sure.
to
I'm
discuss
a
these,
member of
because
the
maybe
capital
there is
outlay.
some functionality that makes it impossible for them to do what they're doing, and that would be good to know. You don't want to, trash the other guy unless you know what his problem is.
Mhm.
But the
So-
school's timeline has to change too, because
Well,
just
we
like,
have no jurisdiction over the
I
school,
get
Don.
that, but that's why we need to look at what the state statutes say that they're
Well,
obligated to do.
That's a whole different problem, and I don't think that's inside of our wheelhouse on
Well,
this.
It destroys his time, it destroys our timeline too. We don't have an actual budget that we're looking at from them.
I
And
get
yet
it, but is there any kind of charter provision we could put in that would be enforceable if we had an enforcement mechanism, or that would help?
I'll have to think about that.
What do other towns do?
I'll have to think about that, I don't know, I really don't. But it
Maybe we
can't
could
be our
look-
only problem, there's 351 towns and cities, and a lot of them have regional school
Districts?
systems.
Well, maybe we should take a look at some of those charters and see what they do, if they can do anything. That's an interesting point. Okay, so we need to look at charters for other towns with regional school districts.
And here's why that actually makes a real difference, because remember we were just talking about the capital outlay plan? If, and I suspect it will, if we get the approval of Chatham's town meeting and selectmen, and we each own our own elementary schools, we will own them not only operationally, but we will own them for capital purposes. So it is really important that we know sooner rather than later what the capital needs of any of those of either of those two buildings. The only one we're worried about is Harwich Elementary, but let's say it needs a roof. And they don't feel like they have to tell us that until like February. And the capital outlay's been meeting the whole time, not realizing that, wow, we might have to borrow $3 million to put a new roof on it.
Right.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, is that the school committee is not, the schools aren't on the capital outlay plan.
They will be if we own our own school.
Yeah, no, but to your point though, there isn't now, and they do have a capital plan. I'll find that out, Don, I'll let you know.
But now we're not talking about a pro rata share. We're talking about we own the problem.
Okay.
Well, we've been paying 75% anyway.
Little off
Wasn't aware
topic,
of that.
but we can certainly take a look at what other towns do. And
Yeah, I
that
guess-
if there is some other way to enforce mechanisms or what have you with the schools.
Yeah, look at the timeline, look at this,
Right.
department head meeting. I think that meeting should be held before the budget is set. In that we understand the budget, the selectmen understand the budget, and then the budget can be set. Now, I realize it's the selectmen's budget. In some towns, the finance committee is the budget, but in this town, it's the selectmen's budget, and ultimately responsibility, Joe is responsible for that, so.
Anything else that we can do to help
No.
or
I
try
think-
to?
No, I think this
All
is,
set?
this is good.
Okay, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for John?
Yeah.
I'm asking for questions. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any
No.
questions.
I'm asking
Set.
for questions.
I
I'm
know
glad
I
you had the
can't-
timeline there. I said, I'm glad you had the timeline there.
Yes.
Maybe John would like a copy. You could email it to him.
Well,
It's only a
this
strong
looks like
suggestion.
something that was prepared by the town budget timeline. I don't
What
know.
about your calendar?
I don't have that with me, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, I was thinking you could mail a copy to John.
I
Yeah,
have a copy, no, I have that
Oh,
copy,
you
I have
have-
a copy of
the
that.
copy that I did?
Yeah, I have that.
I don't have a copy with me, but I certainly, it's on my computer, so.
She
No,
has
I-
the
I-
calendar with the actual dates.
Yeah, I have that, yeah.
Oh, okay, so maybe Joe
Okay.
did use it.
Well, it's the same one that this lady.
Well, the one that I did, I took all the places out of the charter, and, the third Thursday and all of that, and I put it on a calendar, actually, Tuesday, the 25th of January kind of thing.
It's not a table, it's a calendar.
It's
Oh.
a calendar.
And where's that calendar posted?
It isn't.
Oh, it isn't?
It was something that I prepared as a discussion item.
Oh, okay.
And the town administrator liked it very much and was going to pick it up and go forward. I even gave him the program that I had used, to create it.
Okay.
And it just sort of died a happy death someplace, I guess. I don't know.
I got a question that's kind of snarky, but I'll ask it anyway. So, just for the purposes of the open meeting,
I'm sorry, I can't.
when would an article have, that's a petition article, for instance, have to be in by this year?
I just asked Anita that before you showed up.
Yeah.
No, I'm asking it because it should be a public question.
According to the petition, it's the second
Oh,
the
yeah.
second
Oh, you got it.
Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's my only copy.
I
It's the
thought I had a
second Friday
copy
in
with me, but I
February.
guess I don't.
Wouldn't that be something that the general public might want to know, like on the front page
Exactly.
of our webpage?
That's why I asked Anita.
Exactly.
3 or 4 people have called me and wrote me a
It's
note
not
saying.
supposed to be a gotcha date, it's supposed to be a deadline date.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It would be wonderful if everybody knew it, you know.
You say it's the second
I'm just
Friday?
saying.
Second Friday.
I asked the
And it
exact same
still
question.
says noon.
3 people.
Do you understand where I'm coming
The
from?
I know.
petition still says noon,
But that's the way-
but that's not right.
We should have another coffee.
Friday.
Okay,
Second Friday.
thank you, John.
Okay, may I stay?
You may, you're welcome. It's an open public
This one's
meeting.
wired.
John, if you want to take a look, this is my only copy, though.
Okay.
All right, that's what Carol,
I can certainly make more.
I can go downstairs and make photocopies.
That's,
if-
how about
if
just
he
making a
wants
copy
a
and
copy,
emailing it
that's
to
the only-
everybody?
Yeah, we can.
That would be easier, wouldn't
Pardon
it?
me?
Could you just email it to everybody?
yeah.
Do I have everybody's email address?
You might not have
Yes.
John, but I do if
I
you
can give
don't.
you mine.
If you
Yeah,
email it
sure.
to me, I'll make sure that it gets emailed out to the other board members.
That's a good idea.
I'll scribble on the
Okay.
back of this.
no,
Oh.
that's for my notes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, thank
I
you.
asked Don
Better on
tonight to come and talk to us because
Thank
we've
Yep.
had a number of discussions about various things that we've talked about that we would like to see put in motion. A couple of them spin out of our October meeting with our town administrator, who had basically 2 areas of concern. One was the somewhat contradictory or unclear language when it came to selectmen's approval of hirings. Don, it's chapter.
Yeah, I know what it is, but what's unclear?
The
Lower level employees?
timeline between the 2-week timeline, what it says is that the selectmen have 2 weeks to disapprove. 2 weeks from when? 2 weeks from the next meeting, 2 weeks from the date of hire, 2 weeks from the day the guy goes to work. This seems to be problematic, and one of the things that he did say was that he was going to come back to your board and talk to you, the selectmen, about it before he could really give us an indication of how it could be changed to be better.
I got one more issue to lump in with that particular.
Well, let's just stick to this one for a
No,
minute.
this is the same issue.
Okay, but there are the 2 sections about approval of hiring, and apparently in both cases, it's a question of 2 weeks. What does 2 weeks mean? Selectmen meet once every week, so when does the clock start ticking, I think was part of that question. As I say, he was going to talk to the board because he felt that would be the appropriate thing to do first, and that was October, and so far it hasn't happened.
Well, you need to be prepared for the tertiary issue here that's still around. None of that matters if you do what the last town administrator did and presume that that could be waived preemptively by voting to approve the appointment the night that it's presented. And I've made the point on numerous occasions that that's not what that's about.
Interesting.
That was never what it was about, because you can't just waive your 2-week right. It's written in a charter. And then the question is, if they're not supposed to report for 10 days, then what are you looking at? Is it you only? I had read into that in the most egregious of circumstances, that if you found out that somebody got appointed, it was the nephew of somebody else, and they were blowing by a clearly, obviously better candidate. And I think everybody in this room knows I had a row with the Board of Selectmen over this a number of times, because Chris would refuse to give me as opposed to whom. The whole point of rejecting an appointment is if you don't know who the other candidates were, you have no idea, outside of something that's totally ridiculous, like a patronage selection, you have no idea of who it was that was the alternative, because he felt no obligation to share that. He was even starting to do that with higher level hires, department heads. I'm like, there's no way we're gonna confirm somebody without knowing who the other people were.
Right, but, I mean, Joe is not like that. I mean, Joe,
No, but my point is, in the wrong hands, this could be misused unless it's
Right.
changed to be explicit enough so that, nothing you can do will eliminate that 2-week period. When does it start? What's the purpose of it? Really what you need to tighten up.
right,
And
right.
it isn't about Joe.
No, no, no.
It's
right,
about
right.
whoever
It's just
sits in
about-
that seat,
Yes,
and-
yes, yes.
You know, we do find from time to time, people can twist the interpretation of things outrageously.
Oh, yeah,
to-
oh, yeah.
I would hate for it to exist on the basis of, but for the grace of God.
Right.
Because that's the whole reason you have a charter, is that you're not relying on the goodwill of whoever is occupying an office. This is what you have to do.
Right, based on
Okay.
position, yeah.
So that was one. We had also talked about some difficulties he had figuring out what the schedule in the run-up to a special town meeting, a separate and apart special town meeting. Because there's nothing in the charter that says this date, this date, this date, and this date. I mean, I think one could conclude that you would follow the same timeline for a special inside of an annual. But I guess the thought is that maybe that should be spelled out specifically.
Yeah, that may be as simple as you explicitly saying a special within the annual has these same timelines, except, in this case, for somebody to get a petition article, and that's a different deadline.
Yeah.
And it also has different rules, because these guys can veto that petition article. They can't do that. They can
Correct.
opine in the negative in the annual, but they can literally just have it pulled by vote for the special.
But I think it was more a matter of the calendar and the lead up, when is this due, when is that due, and not sure I necessarily see it as a problem, but it may be something that could be, and we should do something with it.
Well, we routinely do use a special in the annual, so.
But this, if you were doing separate and apart, I think was what he was referring to, because we had a special in the fall, that's when this came up,
Yeah, I get it.
yeah.
But the within part, obviously, it's gotta be the same, because she's not printing a warrant that has no special in it until a different date. She prints the warrant.
Anyhow, on these things that he discussed, the immediate problem is that I have been asking for some time for him to get back to us with the kinds of language he would like to see after he's discussed these with the Board of Selectmen, which he wanted to do and said he would and hasn't happened yet. So maybe as liaison, we
I
could.
can bring it up on a selectmen's report for
It
this
would be
coming meeting.
helpful, because the last email I sent was, probably close to 2 weeks ago?
Michael said
asking-
that he talked to Joe just about that specific thing,
Yeah.
and Joe apologized, but it has to happen. I mean, so,
Well,
all I'm prepared to tell you is that's what I was told.
Okay.
The two of them have spoken.
well, we're talking to you as liaison about that, so if you would
I do
carry
the
that
phone call
message
before
forward.
the meeting to say this is gonna come up.
Uh-huh. Anyhow, I think we did figure out that we don't need to worry about the mailing issue, the mailing of a charter
For
to,
purposes of the vote.
for the charter changes. The question was mailing household or taxpayer.
I got an opinion from town council, and what we're going to do, because we do have a charter change, it's going to be sent to every household in the census this year.
So
Okay.
household is the answer.
So household, that's what John,
Giorgio.
Giorgio, thank you. I have the opinion downstairs.
So we don't have to send it to every individual
It's going
voter.
to every household in the census.
Okay, that's great.
This year.
Okay.
I was gonna ride the helicopter that dropped them.
I know. Yes.
All right. And then there's just the other one about updating the whole code to do the water wastewater.
Yeah.
If you look at the code right now, there is the articles that says right above it, that it was changed in
So it's been changed entirely?
It's going to be, I'm still working with them to
Okay.
update it, but the articles are, if you open up the code and you look at the charter, it does state the water, wastewater is like right up above it. And so knowing that that's going to be coming forward.
So
I've
is
sent
that an
every-
administrative change throughout the
It's-
entire code, so we
correct.
don't have to do any
Correct.
revamping?
Okay,
Okay.
so that's in process then,
It's in
right? Okay,
process.
thank you.
Well,
Correct.
you've closed that wound, I'm gonna open up another one for the same organization.
Well, why don't you just hang on for a minute? Anybody else have any other questions or comments for Don? Thoughts? You all set?
Yeah. I
Okay,
am.
go.
I hear what you're saying about that, but I have been saying this for several years, even knowing that, this was even before you got on the committee, when I was chairing it, about the water, wastewater, and how that was gonna work. And they made the unfortunate mistake. It's not unfortunate because of the person, because Dan is just an outstanding superintendent. But you've got a hybrid that is not allowed for in the charter. It doesn't, he's got two masters. And that's how it's happening in practice. That was my hope with changing the structure, was we'd create a firewall that, you know what, as soon as we build them, you run them. So the moment that they were done being built and something was being delivered to them, they went over to the jurisdiction of them. But you got the same superintendent who continues to answer to Joe and to his commissioners. When is that gonna stop?
How do we fix it?
I don't know, because the language in the charter didn't contemplate that there'd be this kind of thing going on. Joe perceives him as an employee, as our employee. And I believe the rest of the board believes that. I personally don't believe that because,
But the Board of Selectmen doesn't hire him.
no, but we were actually contemplating having him as a direct contract employee to the Board of Selectmen up until a few weeks ago.
But he's hired by the Water Commission, Wastewater Commission.
All personnel decisions are rest with them. Kind of like the library trustees, which implies that firing too, and who you're responsible to. My question is, this could have gotten a whole lot worse. What do you guys want to do about that? Because I don't know that it's tenable in the long run to have two sets of bosses. They may have conflicting viewpoints.
Any indication when the board wants to sign off on turning this thing over to the wastewater
The letters are
department?
going out this week to indicate to people in East Harwich that you now have 2 years to hook up. So the people who immediately hook up will start sending flow at that point, and I would argue that it functionally then is organizationally the responsibility of the Water Wastewater Commission because it is a built-out part of the system.
Once they are given the 2 years, not,
Once they hook up. It's unclear to me, that's the other thing, it's unclear to me, when does anybody in this room think that happens? Is that at 100% hookup? Does that mean 40 years from now that they may actually have total jurisdiction for every phase that's ever built? Or is this like when the first hookups start happening in an individual phase? You're gonna have to face that that's a problem, because we're doing this in phases. If we're waiting for the whole sewer system to be completed, it'll be our grandchildren that will wind up having to ponder who runs it.
would have to really go back to the original discussion on that to see what was actually contemplated, but organizationally, it seems to me logical that the day the first bill goes out of that department, it becomes that department's child. Yes, no?
Which has implications. That's why I'm bringing it up. I don't have the answer. I have the question.
Great question. Okay. Any more fun facts?
I thought that would be enough fun for tonight.
Okay.
But he did, as I said, Michael says he's really interested in having you guys in.
Okay.
Don't worry about the select board language because that will be presented. I'd be worried because of who's writing it, so I know
So-
I'm being recorded, but that's okay.
He's talking February 7th. When
He would have preferred the 21st, but that's up to you.
Well, the 21st is probably fine if it gives us sufficient time, and the warrant is still open so that if they want to follow any of our recommendations, and then we could have a meeting in between to
Yeah, as
really
Carol
decide
pointed
what
out,
what we want to say to them.
As Carol pointed out, at this point, whatever John's saying with that meeting is almost a moot point, because it's too late to fix it for this cycle, because we've already blown up a bunch of these things. But we have to admit that there's a problem, and every day we say, well, let's wait until next year, is another day we're getting closer to next year.
Right. What does February 21st look
Are
like?
you meeting the 21st? It's President's Day.
So you'd probably be meeting the 22nd.
That's Washington's birthday.
22nd is when the Board of Selectmen is supposed to give the budget to the Finance Committee.
I know, but I'm old enough to know that
According
that's
to the
Washington.
President's Day is a
That's
holiday.
Washington's birthday.
President's Day is a
That's not
holiday.
gonna happen,
Do you
right?
think you're
And the
going,
14th.
It is, yeah, February 21st.
do you think you're going to meet on that day? Well, let's just say the third week in February.
Whenever that meeting might be. I'll tell them
But
that.
we would like to know sooner rather than later, because people here get to plan a little, what their life is
Yes.
going to be like on that day, whatever it is.
Yes.
No, I told them I'd report back to them.
Okay, so we're gonna say we'll say the 21st, because that's the date offered. Okay, and in the meantime, we will have another meeting ahead of that.
That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, to really focus on, just maybe just a workshop kind of a meeting, just to focus on what we want to bring forward to them as recommendations. Be a
Yeah.
good time to do it. I had thought maybe we would write a letter to the Board of Selectmen, but I think that would be unnecessary.
It's fine. Like I
Yeah.
said, I called them and it was a my bad conversation on his part.
Okay.
So
All right,
they recognize that you did try weeks ago to do it.
okay, sounds good. Anything else? Anybody?
So we should put that down as tentative.
Tentative the 21st. And our meeting,
It's scheduled now for the 8th,
okay, which is 2 weeks?
2 weeks from today.
You want 2 weeks? If you did it on the 15th, it would be 3 weeks. It would be right in between. It's up to you. Oh, I don't care. Anybody have a
The
preference?
15th is okay.
Yeah, Ray?
15th.
Carol?
No, I'm fine.
All right. So regular meeting the 15th,
Okay.
joint meeting 21st or thereabouts.
Third week. Yep.
Right.
Well, 22nd is Tuesday.
I don't know whether the selectmen take a holiday on President's Day.
Oh, that's right.
That's
Yeah.
the only, so if we could know
I
that,
wake up and they point.
That's a Monday holiday,
yeah, if we could know that tomorrow, so we could get the word out to everybody, that would be good.
Okay.
All right,
I hate to bring up one final hand grenade in the room, but it's not a this year thing, it's a next year thing. I opened my big mouth about the noise bylaw about a month or so ago. I suspect you guys are gonna have to vet something that is gonna become a little bit more unwieldy. It's gonna be based on the fact that all of our zones are not equal. The Harwich Port Zone, I think I've discussed this with you before, is 150 feet deep, which makes the noise a more vexing problem there than it would be, say, in East Harwich. And I believe that it's our intention to tackle that in the coming year. So I'm just warning you, that's gonna be coming up, and I think that that's gonna create a little bit more of a problem, because it's not gonna be one size fits all. You know, to vet that kind of a bylaw.
that's gonna be a fun one. How many years have we been playing around with this noise problem?
Long enough so that when I was a selectman in the first iteration, that they shot it down based on I don't want to get arrested. I think it was Ms. Eaton who said, I don't want to be arrested because my baby's upstairs crying at 2 in the morning.
Right. Right.
Some of the
Okay.
town meeting arguments are classic.
Are you done?
Finish is probably more like.
Oh, okay, are you finished? The last thing I had, anybody else have anything they want to get into? If we had just, the last one is just sort of an ongoing, I'm going to leave it at the bottom of every agenda. Anything more that people have discovered in their studies that might be worth looking at? Nope, we're all good? Think we have enough to work on and chew on at this point?
I think the thing that keeps rising to the top, but as John pointed out, is some form of charter enforcement. That we've talked about this
Yep,
many times, and it just keeps coming back, that
yeah.
unless we have a method of enforcing this.
Well, the one advantage we might have this time around is that the chairman of the finance committee actually thinks it's a good idea.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's a start.
Well, I think a lot of people probably think it's a good idea. So.
Well, I think a lot of people at the time thought it was a good idea, but the tactics used to shut it down were not exactly friendly.
Yeah, ironically, they associated a cost component to it.
Yeah.
And then said that because of that, FinCom was against it.
Yeah. That there's someday down the road, somebody might need a lawyer to defend them against somebody who didn't do something they were supposed to do. I'm gonna guess that for the most part, if there's a compliance board with a little bit of teeth in it, that people will clean up their acts, hopefully. Nice thought, right?
Well, yeah, the mere existence of one might help.
It might. I also think that, you know, one of the things I've noticed over the years is the way that a lot of things are interpreted in the moment that were never designed to be interpreted that way, and that it goes to the lawyer who is going to find a way to interpret it however that current board wants it to be. And sometimes these provisions have been stretched to the breaking point with an opinion about what they say that bears no resemblance to what they say. So I'm thinking that along with a compliance board, there should be maybe sort of an arbitration of, if there's a question about interpreting the charter, it would come to that board first. And never mind paying lawyers $10,000 to try to create pretzels out of straight lines. So that's just
I
part
am
of
not the prevailing view of the Board of Selectmen, but I am totally in agreement with what you just said, because, I mean, Giorgio, it's no secret, even if he watches this tape, I've not been a big fan of his, so it really boils down to
Nor am I, Don,
the
and that
best
will come as no
decisions that
surprise to
money can
anyone.
buy.
Anyhow, anything else? Motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go home.
5:57.
Wait a minute.
What? Oh.
When that's off, I have a comment.